Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending upon when you are watching this lecture. I'm excited to be taking you through the measurement portion of this learn section. So before we get to this, I just want to say we are getting pretty into the semester, right? We are not too far, but not far, right? Summer classes go quick, so hopefully you're staying on top of all of your different lecture material. So I will get into this, so let's jump into it without any further ado. So in this conversation, we're going to start talking about measurements within regards to the field of research methods or applied research methods. In this lecture, we'll cover how to construct our concepts that we want to study so that we can observe our variables in the way that we can measure them, right? Measurement is the careful, deliberate observation of real world for the purpose, observation of the real world, sorry, for purpose of describing objects and events in terms of the attributes composing a variable. It's a lot said at once, right? Remember that a variable is something that has a variation within it, variable variation. And those items that vary are its attributes. I mean, that sounds pretty simple, right? But let me reread that to you for clarity. Remember that a variable is something that has variation within it, and those items that vary are in its attributes. Gender is the variable, and its attributes are men and women. Age is the variable, and its attributes are all the specific ages, such as 5 years old, 21 years old, 60 years old. We can measure anything that exists, and we can also create constructs or made up definitions about things that don't really exist in nature in order to measure them. So going forward, let's get into it. Yeah, right? So we're going to be covering different topics throughout here, so make sure to pause or slow down, whatever works best for you. But most of our variables in the social sciences are actually constructs such as prejudice, abuse, liberal or conservative, collaborative, love, collaboration. We must come up with working definitions that we agree on in order to get to the point where we can measure them, the items, right? Conceptualization is the process where we specify what we mean when we use particular terms. We need to describe the indicators we will use to measure the concept. How do we describe, how do we, or how would we, or how do we measure something, right? An indicator is the observation that we choose to consider as a reflection of the variable we plan to study. So, for example, right, if we want to study religiosity, how religious is a person or how religion is in general, right? We might consider that attending religious services is an indicator of religiosity. Yes, concepts have various dimensions as well, which are specifiable aspects of concept. We could define religiosity using various dimensions such as belief, rituals, or knowledge about the religion. So we might have the indicators that fit with the various dimensions to consider how religious someone is, right? How many times does a person attend religious services? How often does a person carry out the religious rituals? How deeply do they consider their religious beliefs in their own lives? How much do they know about religion? Now, a little information from me to you as someone who has worked in this field. I did a massive study when I was prior to being here in academia for a very large megachurch living on the edge. And one of the things that we did for them was measure religiosity. And they gave us the founding indicators, the areas that they wanted to measure, what they defined as religious, so that they could gain an insight into whom their member base was, who was to them truly religious. So Living on the Edge wanted to hire a market research company, my company, to be able to go in and measure their sample, aka their database, aka their religious institutional cohort, so that they could gain an understanding of who was a frequenter and who was someone who was just there on, Christmas Eve, right? They wanted to know whom was really a part of the church. Little fun fact for you there. So most of our variables in the social sciences, pulling back to what we're talking about, are actually constructs such as prejudice, abuse, liberal or conservative, collaboration, or love, like we were just saying, right? The specification of concepts depends on both nominal and operational definition, nominal, operational. So first, a nominal definition is assigned to a term without any claim that the definition represents a real entity. It's a lot. Let me say that again for you. A nominal definition is assigned to a term without any claim that the definition represents a real entity. It's basic, general descriptions that defines the construct. Okay. A huge fan of ASU's football team may be defined as someone who loves ASU's teams, or vice versa if you like to play the game of U of A versus ASU, however you want to do it, right? Someone who loves ASU's teams more than the average person, the person who is a diehard Sun Devil. That's a nominal definition of the concept. How could we measure that? How? An operational definition specifies how a concept will be measured. How would we further define what it takes to love ASU's team? Well, this is where your specific dimensions and indicators become important. Are the various dimensions to how the love would be shown to the team? Maybe it's the rituals, knowledge, enthusiasm. What indicators will reflect the love for the team in each of these dimensions? Attendance at the game and other events, knowledge of the history of ASU's team, or knowledge of the particular players this year, this season, whatever you have it. Do they dress up in the jersey? Do they yell and cheer at each other? So to fully define our concept, that can be measured. We need to go from a progression, blah, of conceptualizations, right? Come up with a nominal definition, then an operational one, and then we want to measure the real world. This is where we operationalize that, right? That is, we put our operational definition into action through specific measurement techniques. We choose to measure our concepts now that we have defined them. Now, there are 4 levels of this. Let's get into it. Hold on one second right here while I change the slide. Let me make myself smaller. There we go. All right. So on your screen, you should see some of the things we just talked about. There are 4 levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Most basically, a nominal measure is the level of measurement describing a variable that has attributes that are merely defined, different from each other. These are just different categories that we don't have rankings, right? That's the thing. These are just different categories that don't have rankings associated with them. Types of religion is an example of a nominal measure: Catholicism, Protestantism, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, the like, etc., right? These categories are simply different. One is not ranked higher or lower than another. Sex, race, country of origin, political party affiliation are examples of nominal measures, and the list can go on and on and on, right? An ordinal measure is the next level up from the nominal, and this is the level of measurement describing a variable within attributes we can rank order along dimensions, yet there was still no equal distance defined between the attributes. An example would be a socioeconomic status, as composed of the attributes high, medium, and low. Another would be the U.S. Marine ranks, such as private first class, lance corporal, corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant, master sergeant, sergeant major, or even political beliefs. The political spectrum, such as very liberal, liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, conservative, very conservative, rhino, right? There's so many different ways to look at this. And I studied this a long time when I did work for political organizations. Any item that you can strongly disagree or strongly agree and answer, never, sometimes, often, always, are another example of ordinal measures. Now, interval measures come next, and this is the level of measurement describing a variable with attributes that are rank ordered and have real equal distances between adjacent attributes. The Fahrenheit temperature scale is an example of this because the distance between 17 and 18 degrees is the same as between 89 and 90. Another example would be the IQ results, right? The difference between 110 and 120 is the same as 130 and 140. Many of the scale items that we'll discuss in the next lecture are interval measures. Keep this in mind as we move forward. And the highest level of measurement is the ratio measure, which describes a variable with an attribute that have all the qualities, nominal, ordinal, interval measures, and are based on a true 0 point. Any variable with attributes that are contiguous fit here. Age ratio measure when listing out actual years old. 40 is twice as old as 20. Educational levels listed as first, second, third, fourth, etc., etc. Grade is also a ratio measure. The measurement levels are hierarchical, where a ratio is at the top and the nominal is at the bottom. You can change higher levels into lower levels, but not the vice versa, right? You can't go from the lower to higher. For instance, we can take age ratios measures and ask a person to write in their current age in years old. We could then turn it around to an interval with scales that are equal in distances, about 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, right? Or an ordinal measure of 0 to 17, 18 to 30, 31 to 45, right, etc. Or child, adolescent, early adulthood, mid-adulthood, later adulthood, elderly. So it's necessary to decide which type of measurement to use before collecting your data so that you can get what you need for reporting your findings. It's usually better to get a higher level, more precise measurement than you are usually better to get a higher level, more precise measurement that you can change into a lower level than only asking lower levels and not having enough information for your report. So if you aren't sure how precise your measurement should be, err on the side of operationalizing with more precision than less. So here's what we're talking about here. Let me just give you a quick TLDR, right? Since I was giving you some lectures here, we have the different levels of measurement. Perfect. Nominal for your breakdown. I will have these posted so you can go through these. Ordinal, interval, ratio, levels of measurement. Hey, look, I'm over here. Sorry. And then we get to what we're going to be talking about just now, okay? So mutually exclusive versus exhaustive, right? No matter which level of measurement you choose, most importantly, the attributes must be both mutually exclusive and exhaustive. Mutually exclusive means there can only be one attribute for the research participant to fit into. If you are looking at what range yearly income the participant has, the categories of your ranges must not overlap. That is so important when you get to do any type of work quantitatively or qualitatively, especially quant. So we'd want to do something like 10K or less, $10,001 to 25K, 25K and $1 to 40K. And the like, instead of 10K or less, 10K or 25, you want to have that separation, right? 25K to 40. You need to have that little $1 at the end, right? So it makes it a different level. As a person who makes exactly 10K or 25K would fit into two categories, which is bad news bears for data collection and research. Now, exhaustive means that there must be one attribute for the subject to fit into. So if we only had 10K, 25K, 25.1K, and 40K, and so on, and we left out the less than 10K attribute, anyone making less than $10,000 would not have an option to choose. Of course, our ordinal measure would need to also go all the way up to a number that makes sense, such as maybe 150,000 or more, so that those who make more than that also have an option to choose. And the quality of our chosen measurement must also be considered. It is precise. Is it an accurate description of measuring your concept? How reliable, how valid are your measurements, right? Reliability is the quality of measurement method that suggests the same data would have been collected repeatedly and in this observation. What did you score on your last exam is more precise than about how many exams you passed throughout your college career. Just because we can get the same data each time we ask does not mean it is the accurate data. I could think that I got an A on the last exam, right? But really I forgot to take it and got a 0. Yet every time you ask me, I could tell you I got an A. So reliability is if we are collecting the same information repeatedly, not necessarily is all about if we're collecting the same information repeatedly, not necessarily if it's correct. Ways to test reliability include the retest method, which is when we take the same measurement more than once. The split half method, where we make sure, and going down, let me make sure I get this slides for you. So here's reliability, validity. Now we're going to kind of look at these different breakdowns. My apologies on not switching slides there, right? So we make more than one measurement of a social concept and split them to see if the measurement is still the same. So this gives us some types of classifications. Another option is to use the established measures, such as the items that have been used in our other studies. And we should check reliability of the other people who are working on our research team to make sure that they are asking questions or coding information in the exact same way each time. Now, validity is the term describing a measure that accurately reflects the concept is intended to measure. So reliability is the measure gets the same result each time. And then validity, if it is the measure is accurate. So quiz results from the past several chapters may be more valid of how a student is doing in class than having them report how many hours they are studying. Makes sense, right? So relative validity can be determined on the basis of face value, criterion validity, construction validity, and content validity. Face validity is the quality of the indicator that makes it seem reasonable measuring of variability. On its face, it makes sense. Or there is common general agreement we all accept without much explanation. Grades on quizzes and assignments related to the textbook material makes a good sense for measuring how well a student is showing understanding the concepts or criterion related validity, and is how much our measure can predict the external criteria. Does the GRE test? So here's an example, right? Does the GRE test for prospective doctoral applicants accurately relate to the graduate student ability? Constructing validity is the degree to which measures results to other variables as expected theoretically. And content validity refers to how much a person covers the range of meaning, including within the concept. While our goal is to create operational definitions that are reliable and valid for what we want to measure, right? We must remain as objective as possible in our roles as researchers and not let our own biases guide the way that we measure our concepts. So remember, always try to measure with precision, reliability, and correct the paths and the steps of the correct paths and steps of the scientific method. As someone who has worked for market research companies, it is true that numbers don't lie, but people will, as you will realize when you get in the field, but people will, as you make the data say what they want. Don't do that, right? They will ask you to take this situation. They will ask you to make a Likert 7-point into a 6-point so that they can seem better. It's all about authenticity and making sure you measure with validity and reliability. Never allow your data to be compromised because someone doesn't like the results. And make sure that when you're choosing and picking your topics that you measure properly. Don't try to finagle the data to what you want it to say. Sometimes the story we think we're going to tell is going to be better because it's going to be the story that's true, because we never know what the data is going to show us. There's stories and data. My father used to always tell me this. There's stories and data. Your job is to tell them and tell them accurately. I'll see you next lecture.